Hey, 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 gonna do some magic today. What's up, Gregory? And if you're watching, Leah, yay. This is Lacey's spiritual class. Yay. Really, I'm going to take you loosely through some of the connections that helped me after my spiritual world blew up. When I was in Christianity, I was pretty certain that I knew everything because I researched and read the Bible cover to cover 16 times, whatever, who was counting, but I read it a bunch, right? Because it's that source, right? It's your sword, right? It's your everything, right? Everything in the word, right? Everything, everything. I even went to a Jewish temple to try to learn Hebrew, right? Or to learn, Osh, yeah. Anyway, I did a lot of overthinking Christianity, but I always knew that I felt a connection to something, right? Now, is that connection because I was in a room full of other people whose brain consciousness vibes were going on? And that is what made me feel that way? Or is it because there was an actual connection to something actually bigger, right? Something actually cooler. And I think that's where I felt super lost at for a long time. In fact, I mean, we had a whole congregation, right? Pastor, right? That we had been youth pastors and then moved into pastorship and went to school for it. And yeah, started a whole ass congregation and then had to be like, we don't think being gay is wrong, right? Like all these things that they would be like, and God's going to smite people. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about because the God that I feel like I'm connecting with is super loving and would never promote that, but then does in the Old Testament, right? So like contradictions, so, all the things that you probably discovered. Um, so when I left, right, Christianity, all of my prayer journals, right, because I had prayer journals. I'm a Virgo. I log everything. I love journaling or talking out loud. Verbal processors are Virgos, right? If I don't say it out loud, does it even exist? Or write about it, does it even exist? Um, so it felt like a ship had blown up and I was floating on a plank in the middle of friggin' nowhere, right? I went from this certainty, what I thought was land and unsinking sand, right? Like what I thought was sure all of a sudden was like, oh my God, where am I? This is scary. And then I felt kind of angry at, God, right? God, spirit. I kind of get triggered by the word God still sometimes, but I got pissed because I felt like I had a close relationship to you, fool, right? Like I had a close relationship, like how I felt you, dude, right? I felt you. We were close. We were close. We were close, right? So why didn't you tell me? But then that was also at the same time God being like, well, I did. It's just how much do you love me? Would you leave everything now and like really come find me? And I'm like, oh, and Jesus is like, yeah, it's totally not easy. And so I'll personify them sometimes. So as part of my spiritual practice now, I'll sometimes picture talking to a Jesus character, and that shape shifts because it doesn't matter, right? Ultimately, it's ultimately the connection in my own mind that I'm making. And so I like to picture Jesus. Like I have a friend named Dan, and he is Middle Eastern, and I picture Dan wearing an ugly Christmas sweater, and that's Jesus, kind of a thing. Like that's one way that I'll picture talking to it. And then I have to still say it because is it Jesus? The answer for me still is like, does it matter? Does the label matter? And I'm like, to my parents, it does, right? To my mom, she's like, who do you say Jesus is if it's not these things, right? The savior and all this stuff, right? Like, if it's not what I think of as what the definition should be, then you're not saved. Meanwhile, I'm having dreams of or imaginings talking to Jesus, right? Like I had this one little mini dream vision where I was like, what happens after this? What happens if I leave you? What happens if God, what happens if I will I go to hell? I was concerned with that, when I was first leaving Christianity. Am I going to go to hell? And then um, I imagined, or this vision sort of came to me, this little dreamy dream. And it was like, I was coming around a back wall, like there was this walled city. And I came through a back way, right? And this guy who looked like Jesus, in my imagination, Jesus was like, "Hey, what's up?" Like a friend, And I was like, "What happens when I leave this wall? When I'm outside of it now, what happens when I leave this?" And the person who in my dream space was Jesus, that's what I identified it as in my dream state, goes, "Well, you know me, right?" And I was like, "I mean, yeah, right? We know each other." He's like, "Oh, I consider you one of my best friends." And I was like, "Oh my God, thank you so much." And then Jesus is like, "So if spirit, right? If God owns the world and everything in it, right? Everything, every dimension, every thought, everything, where are you going to go that is not?" And I was like, "I guess I can't go anywhere without that not being there." And then Jesus like high fived me. He's like, "Yeah, that's it. Go have fun. Like don't worry about that anymore. I will let you in. You know me. I know you. We have vibed. I'll let you in. And I was like, all right, cool. And so something about that allowed me to then explore things. Now, so spirituality, right? The first thing I would say that my hubby and I explored, and this is all like pretty private stuff, but the first thing we explored is sort of like the sexuality, the taboo things, right? That's the first thing. Because that was something that a Virgo, you will know this is a Virgo, there's a purity, right? We care about purity. It's the sign of the Virgin in astrology, right? So like there's this arm's length, arm's distance. I need to know that this feels right, is um it has checked off all the boxes in my mind, right? I need to know that all the boxes have been checked off, and then I can be like, give myself over, right? So what does that mean, right? This purity thing, was like a big one, especially because my husband and I had been virgins when we got married. That was a big deal to us. We were both, he's a Virgo sun and I'm an honorary Virgo because I have a lot in my chart. So anyway, so all of that, we have children during this time too when we're coming out of Christianity. And then we leave Christianity for many years because and kind of all spirituality because it felt like it hurt to touch it or to like talk about it because it just felt so uncertain and it felt so scary. And am I going to lead people the wrong way now because I don't have a clear vision and I did have a clear vision, and untangling all these thoughts, all these things. So how do I connect back? um I remember I was watching some movie and it had a dog in it, and that dog was uh rescued its owner or something like that, right? There was this moment between a dog and a human, and I thought, oh, I love that, and then this sort of voice, I call it a voice. It's not really. It's a thought voice. So I had this thought voice that was like, me too. I love that, and I was like, ooh, and it sounds like my own voice, right? It sounds like your own voice because I am Stardust. Um, so I start to listen to my own voice and my own voice, which was always the voice, sort of having these interactions, right? Having these little mini dreams, these little mini thoughts, that were kind of slowly bringing me back. I would start to recognize that feeling that I had when I was in church and in that space of, oh, right? I would start to get glimpses of that again. I think I really crossed that out for a long time because it felt like that duped me. And so I started to kind of have to open myself up again to, what was the feeling that I had that was good, right? What were the things that I had that were good, that made me feel full, that made me feel awesome, made me feel expansive, made me feel like I could love the whole world, right? That made me feel like, nah, you know, I am deeply and intimately loved, right? By a spirit. In fact, if you ask me, I think I'm God's favorite. Just kidding. I mean, not really, but I definitely think that spirit likes my attitude. I think human consciousness likes the attitude that I have. Anyway, so bringing back to spiritual things, my daughter was wondering about like tarot cards one day, and I was like, oh, I hear they're demonic, they're satanic, right? Like there's this like, I don't know about that. And then I was like, well, okay, to make sure that none of that is what I think it is, I'll go down this path with you, I'll learn this path with you, you know. And so I start to learn about tarot cards. And when you're learning about tarot cards, the Rider Waite deck, right? This is what it's called, the Rider Waite deck. Because it's one of the OG ones, the Rider Waite, the art looks like this, right? It's a good one to learn on, because it gives you the sort of oldest definitions that we know of. There are older versions of decks, but this is pretty close to like Italian OG, the deck. They also have astrological correspondences that says Saturn and Taurus. It's probably backwards to you, but that's the astrological correspondence. So I first started actually with tarot, learning tarot. I watched YouTubes about it. What is the meaning of the cards? And then I watched other tarot readers on topics that I thought were interesting. You can find them all over YouTube. Your wife, right, Leah, she totally knows tarots on the onlines because my inspo board has some, and or I think we were all talking about it one day. So essentially what you're doing is you're shuffling the cards, right? However they shuffle. Okay. And the card that came out right now, just in this moment, was the Hanged Man. And the Hanged Man represents a different perspective. I am putting things on a pause because I've understood things walking around upright. And now I want to go upside down to see what I see that's new. And then we have like this enlightenment, right? And this person isn't even fretting. They're literally chilling just upside down on a tree or a vine or a whatever it is, right? From a steady source, right? And so when you start to know what the cards mean, right, the card definitions, what they mean, then you can start sort of shuffling, and whatever cards fall out are things that you'll look up. So for a long time, I would be all Hanged Man. I used Biddy Tarot, Biddtarot. I used Biddy Tarot for card meanings, and I'd be like Hanged Man, um, tarot card meaning, and then they give you like definitions of it. And so that's, you just kind of get familiar with the terms, and then when a card pops up, you're like, oh, it means this, right? And the interesting thing here is that um yeah, the super interesting thing is they always bring some kind of meaning, right? So is it directly from, spirit source? Some say yes. I know what evil feels like when it's around me, right? So this is something else that I learned to grow to trust myself about, right? Like my mom is like, how do you know if it's God or Satan? And I'm like, one's uplifting and one tears down, right? Like one makes me feel like yes, and one makes me feel like oh, right? Like those are the definitions in my mind. So yeah, so if you once you I guess too, deal with that it's been in you all along, right? Those feelings were there all along. You can trust those feelings. It's those feelings and that intellect that got you out of that institution in the first place, right? You can trust yourself. You're the kind of person who can be like, oh, I firmly believed this thing, but then I was presented with evidence that now makes me think, oh, it's not exactly what I thought it was. It's bigger, it's different, it's not, it's copied, right? So those are the things that, start to come to light. And so then dealing with what makes me feel uplifted, what makes me feel that feeling of touching divine, right? What makes me feel that? And what makes me feel like I can't, like I shouldn't, like um, I judge myself, I restrict myself because I feel like I'm not worthy, right? Now that's more the evil stuff. So if you're shuffling your cards and you start to have like negative thoughts of unworthiness, um, Job, you will probably think this is interesting. I learned a long time ago that in the book of Job, the word Satan, right, was a title. It was the title for the accuser, for the prosecutor, right? I don't even recall where I learned this, but I think it was in like one of my Hebrew classes actually. Anyway, um, but it means accuser. So I know that I'm interacting with the accuser when I start to judge myself, accuse myself, make myself feel less than, not worthy, right? That's when I know evil is trying to break its way in and make me feel less than, like I'm not, you know, divine myself, right? Have that divine spirit spark myself. Anything that makes me feel like that. And not so much like, it's not that I'm like, oh my God, I'm perfect all the time, right? Not like that. It's more like oh, one of them has an expansive feeling like, oh, I didn't know that. Thank you. Um, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. Thank you. Right? Like, oh, that's added to my knowledge. That's added to my understanding, right? Now that gives me like expansive, hopeful, that is divine goodness, right? Divine shit is when you're like, um, you could never be that. You weren't that, right? You're not good enough, right? Oh, you're not perfect, right? Those things. That's when the accuser and feeling accusatory is coming in and trying to make me feel like I can't talk with the divine, that I'm not a part of it, that I'm not in it, right? So that's sort of a basis for how it feels. One feels like, ooh, thank you, gratitude, and one feels closed, fuck you, but in a not good way, right? There's a fuck you, Satan, not today. That's good. And then there's the, sort of blamey, how could you, fuck you, right? Which is all like that shaming shit. All right. So if you want, learn on a Rider Waite. That way you can look at the details of the pictures, right? You can look at them. And then most people teach using the Rider Waite. And because there's symbolism and all, right? Swords is all about intellect, dashing in, a very smart person, right? Clarity. So it just gives you prompts. They're like prompts for you to like shuffle and then look at and be like, oh, that's a prompt, right? Like, what does it look like to feel like a fool, but like in a good way? Anyway, so that is tarot. So I studied it, learned its thought, learned its, meanings of the cards, and now I shuffle and then trust my feeling. Trust your feelings. Oh no, right? The other thing that I do, well, there's another thing too. So we talked about an altar, and you had mentioned candle magic. So I have this little altar. I'm going to take my camera. Hopefully, it won't get too bad vertigo, but we're going to lift you up and we're going to take you over here to my altar. Okay. Let's see if I can give you perspective. Sorry, it might be a little bit shaky, Cam, but just be down. So this sits kind of right by me every day, and it has the four elements, right? Things move backwards in this world. Okay. So this is water, right? Water is intuition, feelings. How can I honor my intuition and my feelings? I made this little table altar thing too. I made this little altar. I'm definitely probably sick, so sorry. I'm so bad at okay. So I made this altar. I'm a proponent of anything handmade. Anything handmade is better and more magical than anything not, but that's my personal opinion. So we've got water here, which represents intuition. Now, water can put out fire, right? Water, when mixed with earth, they combine together, right? If I put this salt, this is salt in here, right? The salt in here. Everything is back. Okay. So, yes. All right. So this is salt in here because salt is just an old way of representing earth. People used to put salt on their altars to represent earth. And I can't help but think of the scripture that was talking about saltiness, right? So keep your saltiness in a good way. All right, so we've got water, and water sits next to earth. They make mud, right? They can build things, they can dry, right? What dries it out? Air. Air will dry it out, and heat can dry it out, right? And then you have a new thing, right? So we took intuition and we took tangible thoughts, things that we know, and then we combine them and we make new earth, right? Um, earth and fire, right? Earth and fire here. It makes me think of like lava, right? Like super hot earth can become kind of a liquid, right? Like that's a thing. But fire doesn't super burn, or it burns the earth, right? Earth can be fuel for fire if it's dry and not taken care of, right? So those can be a fuel for each other. And then earth can also put out fire, right? Like what's something tangible that can put out this fire? So fire represents like our passion, our fire. I'm a double Aries, right? So I'm a lot of fire. You are a double Leo. That's a lot of fire. Yours is a little more sustainable. Mine's a little more like impulsive. Oh shit, right now. I feel inspired. Oh yeah, right? Um, so fire, right? Fire is, I'm trying to put this down here more a little bit. So fire. So sorry. Okay, fire. 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 Fire is passion. I have it housed here. I'm a double fire, so I have to really honor that fire. Fire is warmth. Fire cooks things so we can eat things, right? Fire sustains. If you get too close to fire, you feel it, right? There is a fucking burn, right? So if you get too close to passion, we can passion the F out, right? And then things like water can put out fire, right? So being aware that I can put out my own fire, I can put out other people's fire, their passion. If you've ever seen somebody angry and they're showing a lot of fire, a lot of rage, a lot of, sort of that fire as a forest fire, it's extreme, right? Then I think of water, and water is able to put it out. Now, what is water? Water is intuition. So water then here can put out a fire. So you can't use your words or your body for fighting. You now have to step into your emotions to help put out that fire, right? And so if you're interacting with someone, using your intuition will douse a fire every time, even our own, right? Using our own intuition. So it's really what an altar represents is balance, right? How these elements work together. I'm sure you can think of ways that water and fire put each other out, earth can put fire out, how these two can build and work together. And then air, right? Air represents intellect. This is what I use for my candle magic. So I use this to inscribe on my candles, right? That candle magic. I have some sage and some palo, right? Which is all like protection and stuff like that. And I'll light some and then just kind of, fan myself with it or whatever, right? But it represents intellect. So like your wife has a lot of intellect. I have Aquarius intellect. Your wife has like spiritual, will also have like some kind of spiritual intellect too, right? That's like super important. So an altar is just a way to honor all the bits of yourself, right? And to honor the bits in other people. So we like these things to have balance, and that's sort of the idea of all that, is to have balance. Okay. Bring you back over here. All right. So now when we talked about sort of like altar and balance, those are just tangible things, right? Those are things we see in our everyday life. I make them pretty because I like to have the pretty things. Now when I'm doing like rituals and stuff, like Celtic rituals, I follow this book here, and it's just a way to Celtic magic. A lady at a witch store gave this to me, and she's so sweet. She's a Leo herself. And anyway, so I'll celebrate the autumn equinoxes by following these. And um it's kind of cool. It feels ancient in a way, it's traditional. They do celebrate the old gods, but I just think of that as the unnameable the unnameable ones, the unnameable one, whatever. And then I make unicorn crowns. So remember how I talked about costume, costume, costume? This is a part of it, right? So wearing anything that makes you feel your awesomeness, right? Like right now, you're a high priestess. And then I have like this cute little robe thing that I got at this boutique, and it's got gold stars on it, right? Wear that action. See, now I'm a high priestess. See, right? Costume is everything. You're a wizard, Larry, right? Anyway, what made me think of. And then I also have other unicorn crowns that I invite my friends to wear so they can also feel magical and unicorn and spiritual and silly with me, fun with me, right? Um, all right. And then this is my little magical book. It's the Never Ending Story. It's based off the Orin in Fantasia. Hopefully, you've seen that in your life. Normally, there's a little lock on this, but I've unlocked it because I want to show you the first page. But it's the Never Ending Story. It's Fantasia. Why? Because all of this kind of is, apparently. That's the hack. That's the key. We live in Fantasia. Um, so another example of a time. So I mentioned silliness, right? I mentioned this idea of I used to take everything so seriously, and now I'm like, why are you taking this so seriously, girl? I have my little earrings that I made. There's the sun and moon, you know. Everything just has like whatever I think of as sacred or awesome or magical. These things right here, this earring, I'm bouncing whatever, but this earring here, it's supposed to look like a sun, and I made it out of this it's one of those old Barbie movie CDs. My daughter and I used to watch those together when she was little. And so I had a CD that had been scratched up and unusable. So these are my daughter and my happy moments together on art. So making everything art. I handmade these, right? This is a shell. This is a bracelet I cut into. This is a part of a shirt that I like the lace on, but didn't want to wear the rest of it, right? This is a chain, I think from my grandma. And these are feathers that just look cool because it looks like a headdress, right? So I make my own magical, tangible things, right? Things that make me think of spiritual, things that make me feel grounded um, in fun, in love, in a magical unicorn dream world, because that's how mine works. And so I had another dream, which I've mentioned one night, uh, where I was putting out moon water. And that's like a practice where you put water in a bottle, and I use wine bottles because then I can label them. And wine bottles are cool looking to me. So you put water in it, and then on the full moon, the night of the full moon, you put your water out, and then it's like charges the water, right? It's the idea that the moon affects us, right? And it affects our inner world and our yin bits, our feminine bits. So it's a way to sort of celebrate those feminine bits, old bits. And so I put the water out. And then the intention is you're going to tell yourself a story, right? What's the prayer you want with this water? What's the thing that you want to manifest, right? And then I use, because I do astrology, I use whatever sign the moon is in. Like the Aquarius one's coming up. So being eccentric, baby, and celebrating that, right? Celebrating the rebel. Oh my God, you're a rebel just now. Girl, get it, right? Aquarius is the sign of the rebel. So this one night, the first time I put out moon water, right? I had this dream where I was like I was walking through the middle of a forest, and then it came to this clearing, and at the other end of this clearing was this woman, and she was dressed like all in white, right? She was like this moon goddess in my mind, right? And I walked up to her and I was like, oh, so is this bullshit? Is this bullshit? Is this real? Like just very blunt. And then she goes, well, bullshit is fertilizer. It helps things grow. And I was like, oh, what was that? That was so good. So I'm now at the beginning of all of my journals that are magical in nature. I write bullshit is fertilizer. on all of them. Just to remind myself, even if it is, it still is going to make something grow, you know? And that is a fun thought for me. Um, so yeah, it's really more what I find that I'm doing these tangible, touchable things, right? What I'm attempting to do is make what I feel tangible, relatable, chat aboutable, right? Like that is what I'm attempting to do. I'm attempting to make a feeling a thing. So crystals are something that are good for that, right? There's a story with every crystal, right? Lapis lazuli is known to be a gem, a stone. First of all, it's a stone that Egyptians used for their color blue. They would crush it up, and that's how they would use this for eye makeup, which I think is absolutely fun. And then, so it was sacred to beauty, right? So Venus, the you know, planet of beauty, is represented by lapis lazuli. So if I want to like sort of interact with my Venus side, I can like picture talking to a Venusy person. Mine's a mermaid. Oh, mermaid. And I'll picture talking, having a conversation with her, right? And then I can talk about a conversation with somebody else that I had with my imagination, right? So, and if I want to feel more like, loving or hopeful, the story with this crystal, right, is that, oh, hey, love. The story I tell with this crystal is it's turquoise and it represents Jupiter, right? Jupiter, another benefic in the sky. So I have a crystal basically for all of the planets. Now, this is the biggest trip for me. This was the biggest trip. So, how do you become an astrologer? Now, that's interesting after leaving Christianity because you don't want to be duped again, right? So, as an Aquarius scientist who's constantly testing theories of structures and patterns, right? Aquarius wants to fix social structures, social norms, and we recognize patterns in people. So that way we can know how to help everyone to get along, how to have a friendly community. Aquarius seeks to understand so that everyone, even the rebel, can fit in to this world we live in. So and so it's the sign of the scientist because it's constantly looking for patterns. It's constantly looking for um, did I disprove it, prove it, not prove it, right? And this is why Aquarius, especially, I think, has a hard time staying in Christianity sometimes. Depends upon where the anyway. So the thing that is a trip for me is astrology is interesting in that I love looking at a chart and reading it before I ever meet a person. Now, sometimes it's like not exactly on, but there's like themes, right? Everybody can pick out the themes. And you can even see in somebody's chart specific things. Now, specific things are harder to securely call out because there's so many details involved with that geometry that you saw. But for example, if I see somebody, and you can know this too, somebody who has a Scorpio sun in the fifth house, or in the fourth house, sorry. So Scorpio, Sun, fourth house, there's a high likely degree that that person's father died when they were young, right? That's a pattern I've noticed. So I've just noticed patterns. Um, so with astrology, like I can look at a chart and know a person before I ever meet them. So how could I know a person or know the themes, right, about a person if that shit wasn't some kind of correlation, wasn't some kind of effective? And I think the thing that I like about astrology, and I'm not trying to sell astrology, I'm just telling you why my genius mind went with it after leaving Christianity to come back into spirituality, is astrology is very, very old. It is one of the oldest known relationships to the cosmos, to the divine, right? They called them gods, right? Planets are literally wandering stars, is their translation. So, you have nothing to do and you're watching the stars go by and you're noticing people acting differently depending upon what's popping on up there. And so you think it's the gods having an effect on you. We now know they're planets, right? Do they have personalities? Are they gods? No, it's not a dude. It's not a lady, right? It's something else, going on up there. Now we know scientifically they are planets, right? And so I think what I like about me is that I know that if it ain't true or if it's not going to last or have substance, I'll leave it. I've proven that to myself with leaving Christianity, right? You can have that same trust in yourself, which is super, super rad. But astrology, how can I know about a person? How can I look at a chart and know about them? Know these effects, know these scenarios, or know these themes about a person before ever meeting them. So that to me is interesting in a correlation, right? That is something out there. Now, I'm also okay if something else, new information comes in and it's like, oh, it's this, and we can explain it more definitively and with science. In fact, I kind of hope for that all the time. I love to have solid definitions. So I'm always looking for that. And so I'm always okay then with things changing, things shifting. What I understood then, right, is what I still understand now. It's just morphed between here and there, right? It's just had to shift and change because of new evidence, new information. So all of this to say your spirituality will probably shift. You're here now, you'll be here then, trying things out, right? And trusting your feelings. That's something that I think was drilled out of us in Christianity, but really truly it's awesome. It's a good thing, to trust your feelings. And then when you are listening to those feelings, is it giving you a high vibration? And by that I mean, does it make you friggin' feel good, right? Does it make you feel relieved? Does it make you look at yourself in a mirror and then be like, oh, I could work on that. That's awesome. Thank you for pointing that out, right? If it feels akin to that, then you're on the right track. If it feels like then not. You know what I mean? So anyway, Lacey's in short, not really. Spiritual stuff. So it's ever expanding. I make things. I have visuals that help me with my intentions, my prayers, right? That's ultimately what it is. If you have more questions, you can totally ask me. But yeah, that's not all the things, but it's a lot of the things. I covered a lot of the things. You're doing great. You have that Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, which makes you sort of in touch with Sky Daddy, if you will. So, you know, that's good. Or Sky Mommy. It's a yin sign. Anyway, or whatever. Sky Consciousness? Sky Consciousness. Yeah. All right. Talk to y'all later. Bye.